Okay, so have you ever found yourself right in the middle of writing a totally crucial email? You're super confident in your vocabulary, but then suddenly you just freeze over where to put a comma. Well, it happens to literally the best of us, and it can be incredibly frustrating. Today, we're diving into this explainer to see how a rule that works flawlessly in your native language might actually be quietly sabotaging your English punctuation. We're going to break down 4 specific habits that trip up even the most advanced learners. And more importantly, we'll look at exactly how to fix them for good. Now, what's really fascinating here is that the mistakes we're going to cover today, they aren't exotic, they aren't rare, and they definitely aren't very deep and complex academic texts. They happen constantly, like multiple times a page in ordinary everyday emails, captions, and reports. And they happen because cross-linguistic logic simply doesn't transfer. When your brain is wired for one set of punctuation rules, say the rules in Russian, applying those exact same instincts to English can lead to, well, the single most common punctuation errors native teachers actually see. So it's a really great question to ask yourself. But the good news is instead of making you memorize some massive list of disconnected, frustrating rules, we're just going to look at 4 specific bad habits. We'll apply very simple mechanical tests to fix them right on the spot. And as you'll see by the end of this explainer, we're going to discover one grand unifying theory of English sentence structure that will totally change the way you look at a sentence.
All right, let's jump straight into habit number 1, the however illusion.
So this first habit is all about words like however or moreover, and how they create this really convincing but totally false illusion of connection. In Russian, a word like однако sits right between 2 thoughts, and slapping a comma right before it feels completely normal. It feels correct. But in English, words like however, moreover, or therefore are not conjunctions, they're adverbs. True conjunctions, words like and, but, or so, those are the actual glue of the English language. They have the grammatical power to stick 2 independent sentences together with just a comma. Adverbs, on the other hand, they possess absolutely no power to glue 2 independent sentences together. So putting a simple comma in front of however to connect 2 full sentences isn't just a stylistic choice, it's a complete structural breakdown. To fix this, you absolutely don't need to stop using these fantastic words. You just have to create a stronger seam before the adverb actually arrives. And you have 3 excellent options here. First up, the semicolon. It keeps the 2 ideas close together and reads as fairly neutral, maybe slightly formal. Second is the full stop, or period. This breaks them into completely separate thoughts, and honestly, it's the absolute safest default for almost all of your writing. Finally, the dash. This creates a bit more drama, a longer pause. It's perfect for opinion pieces or when you really want to hammer a point home. But remember the golden rule here. Whichever stronger punctuation you choose to separate the sentences, a regular comma still belongs right after the adverb itself.
Moving right along to number 2, the because boundary.
This brilliantly illustrates the exact mirror image of our first habit, and it pulls from the exact same cross-linguistic interference. In Russian, the phrase "потому что" almost always gets a comma right before it, right? It's just an automatic reflex. But English punctuation for because doesn't care about your reflexes at all. It depends entirely on its physical placement in the sentence. So the question you need to ask yourself isn't, is the word because in the sentence? The question is actually, where exactly does that because clause sit? Here's how it actually breaks down. If your because clause comes right after the main clause, directly answering the question why, there is no comma. For example, if you say, I stayed inside because it was raining, you don't pause before because. The reason is firmly attached. It's not just appended as some afterthought. But the very moment that whole clause moves to the front of the sentence, like because it was raining, I stayed inside, boom, the comma reappears. It specifically marks the boundary where the introductory reason ends and the main action begins. Okay, on to number 3, identifying versus describing clauses. Now, we really need to tackle how English draws a super hard line between 2 very different jobs that a descriptive clause can perform, and punctuation is literally the only signal telling your reader what your clause is actually doing. Sometimes a clause is essential. It's doing identifying work. For instance, if you say, the employee that we hired yesterday needs to go to security, the clause that we hired yesterday is essential. Without it, we have no idea which employee you mean. Because it's essential, it uses the word that and takes absolutely no commas. But what if you say, my accountant, who has worked here for a decade, is retiring? Well, the reader already knows who your accountant is. The clause is non-essential. It just adds a little parenthetical extra detail. This kind of clause uses who or which and requires commas on both sides. If this sounds a little tricky to remember in the heat of writing, don't worry at all. I have a foolproof mechanical test for you called the deletion test. Step 1.
Just mentally remove the clause from your sentence. Step 2. Ask yourself, does the sentence still identify the exact same person or thing? If taking the clause out causes the whole sentence to fall apart and lose its specific meaning, use 0 commas. But if the sentence still names exactly the same person or object without it, put commas on both sides.
You know, the biggest mistake people make here isn't necessarily choosing the wrong pronoun. It's actually forgetting one of the commas. Forgetting one of the commas is a super common fast-writing slip, but here's why it's absolutely crucial to catch it. Using only one comma signals to your reader that you haven't actually decided which of the two jobs your clause is doing. It leaves the sentence structurally completely confused. So always remember, it's both commas or neither.
All right, bringing us to number 4, shifting time phrases.
Let's look at what happens when phrases that tell us when or where something happened start moving around in your sentence. English is actually pretty flexible about where you can put a time phrase. You can throw it at the beginning or you can stick it at the end, but it is absolutely not flexible about how you punctuate it. If a phrase like "in the morning" opens a sentence, a comma marks exactly where that introduction ends and the main sentence begins. In the morning, I drink coffee. But if you take that exact same phrase and move it to the end, I drink coffee in the morning, that comma has to vanish. At the end of the sentence, there is 0 introduction left to mark, so the comma just loses its job entirely. In short sentences, this is pretty easy to just feel out. But in long sentences, man, it is so easy to get lost. So here is another mechanical test to guarantee you get it right every time. Step 1, find the main subject of your sentence. Step 2, check if anything at all comes before it. Step 3, if there is introductory material, just place a comma right before that main subject. This test is entirely mechanical, rather than relying on a feeling, which ensures you get it right even in long sentences with super complex internal structures.
And finally, number 5, structure instead of pauses.
This brings us to our grand finale. We are pulling back the curtain here to reveal that these aren't 4 separate annoying rules at all. They actually all stem from one massive difference in how English and Russian view punctuation. The Russian instinct relies heavily on sound and logic. In that system, commas often equal pauses, breaths, or logical connections. If there's a shift in thought, you drop a comma. But the English reality, it is vastly different. The shared principle here is that English commas mark structural seams relative to other clauses. They act as boundaries, not just wherever you happen to feel a breath or think a logical connection, like however belongs. Think of it this way. English punctuation, it's architecture, not music. So this is your ultimate takeaway. Once you start checking for structure instead of just listening for a pause, all these isolated errors literally melt away into one highly effective, super easily fixable habit. Before you drop a comma onto the page, find the clause boundary first. Identify your subjects, your verbs, your independent thoughts, and your introductory phrases, because once you can see the bones of the sentence, the punctuation practically decides itself. I want you to take this final thought right into your next writing session. The next time you find yourself hesitating over a comma, just pause and ask yourself, am I punctuating for a breath right now or for structure? Watch how quickly your English transforms when you stop listening for breaths and start actually looking for structural boundaries. But you know, it kind of makes you wonder, if your native punctuation habits are hiding in plain sight like this, what invisible rules are secretly controlling your vocabulary and sentence flow right now?